Welcome to the Fall 2025 Attendance Accounting and Instructional Time Requirements webinar. Thank you for joining us today. We know your time is valuable and we appreciate you spending it with us. To begin, we will briefly introduce ourselves. I'm Luke Bailey.
I'm Carrie Ferreira. And I'm Lauren Gehrig.
And we are Education Program Consultants in the Attendance Accounting Office of the School Fiscal Services Division. Throughout today's presentation, we will be referring to many terms using acronyms. For your reference, we have included a list of the acronyms used. During this presentation, we will provide reminders on instructional time and attendance accounting requirements and highlight changes to the apportionment significant requirements in fiscal year 25-26. We will begin by discussing the instructional time requirements, touching on the importance of instructional time, the annual day and minute requirements, minimum day requirements, the school calendar, bell schedules, recent statutory changes, best practices, and the annual audit. In the Attendance for Apportionment section, we will provide a general overview of the requirements to generate average daily attendance, or ADA, which apply to students participating in in-person instruction and independent study. The next section concerns attendance recovery, a new program in effect this year. We will review the apportionment significant requirements for student eligibility, supervision, instructional content, record keeping, and meeting the minimum day. We will explain how students can generate ADA credit for past absences up to a limit and how LEAs will be able to claim that attendance. We will also touch on some key considerations for LEAs seeking to offer both attendance recovery and expanded learning opportunity programs. Next, we will focus on independent study, including an overview of traditional and course-based independent study, including student eligibility, statutory requirements, and highlights. We will review ADA computations, make-up attendance, short-term written agreements, and discuss key planning considerations for LEAs implementing independent study. Our Transitional Kindergarten section will go over the student eligibility and supervision requirements in effect with the full implementation of TK in fiscal year 25-26. Due to the legislative change in the way the average class size penalty is now being calculated, we will step out the calculation and provide an example for reference. We will also provide some resources to help understand how TK requirements are applied. In our Form J13A portion of the webinar, we will review the purpose of the Form J13A, discuss how it affects funding, cover recent changes to the process, including the required board-approved comprehensive school safety plan with instructional continuity plan, and discuss how to prepare Form J13A submittals in fiscal year 25-26. Finally, we will give some key reminders and highlight our quick reference guide. Please note that this webinar is advisory in nature. It is not intended to cover in detail every statutory requirement and exception, nor should it be relied upon as the authority for instructional time and attendance accounting. Additionally, the information provided in this webinar is based on current laws and regulations as of August 19th, 2025. Any legislative changes made after August 19th, 2025 will be updated separately in future communications provided to the field.
Let's begin with instructional time. The Education Code prescribes the number of school days and instructional minutes that must be offered to each student. This varies by LEA type, grade span, and instructional setting. Compliance with this requirement is checked in each LEA's annual compliance audit. Non-compliance may result in fiscal penalties. Instructional time is both required by the California Constitution and essential for funding and many important student services. When students attend a scheduled day of school, they are provided with academic instruction by grade level, access to daily meals and mental health services, and the opportunity to learn social skills with their peers and teachers. California's instructional time requirements are in place because our state has a long history of believing that school is one of the safest environments for students. Student attendance and instructional time are an equity, health, and fiscal issue in California. It is important to note that instructional time requirements are not waivable by the SBE. For all LEAs, instructional time is counted when the student is in attendance under the immediate supervision and control of a certificated employee of the LEA, engaged in educational activities required of them, and attendance is taken. Supervisory requirements are included in the annual audit. Teacher certification is a fiscal finding, and teacher misassignment is a program finding. Monitoring these requirements through the annual audit ensures compliance with credentialing laws, and any findings would result in fiscal penalties. There are annual day and minute requirements for school districts and charter schools. A school district is required to offer 180, and a charter school is required to offer 175 annual days of instruction per school year. Both entities are required to offer the following number of annual instructional minutes per grade span. For TK and K, 36,000. Grades 1 through 3, 50,400. Grades 4 through 8, 54,000. Grades 9 through 12, 64,800. The school year operates between July 1 and June 30. School districts are required to maintain all of the elementary day schools and all of the day high schools for an equal length of time during the school year, which is known as the equity length of time requirement. Equity length of time requirements are based on the annual instructional minute offering, which is illustrated in the box on the left. A day of school at a school district shall only count towards the instructional time requirements and for ADA purposes if it has been scheduled for at least the minimum day. This is known as a daily minute requirement. Please note that in general, the daily minute requirement is not applicable to charter schools. For COE programs, requirements are dependent upon the instructional setting. Compliance for these requirements is checked during the annual audit, and failure to comply will result in fiscal penalties. Please note that fiscal penalties may be waived by the SBE if certain conditions are met. A day of school shall only count towards the instructional time requirements and for ADA purposes if it has been scheduled for at least the minimum day. This is not applicable to charter schools. While charter schools do not have daily instructional minute requirements, they are required to offer enough minutes in a school day to meet the annual instructional minute requirement. As stated in the previous slides, in addition to meeting the annual day and minute requirements, school districts and county programs must schedule students for a minimum number of minutes of instruction per day in order for the day to count towards meeting the annual instructional day requirement. This table reflects the daily instructional minute requirements for school districts by grade span and setting. COEs must also meet minimum daily instructional minute requirements in order for the student's attendance to generate apportionment. This table reflects the requirements for county programs. Please note that for all LEAs, a special education student who has an IEP must be educated consistent with their IEP. Students with IEPs generate attendance based on traditional attendance accounting rules with regard to required supervision, and the instructional day length is established per the provisions of the IEP. Services stated on the IEP need to be provided as written, regardless of the student's setting. When the student is taught on a school day consistent with their IEP, that student generates a day of attendance for that school day. We have included slides at the end of the presentation with links to the Education Code sections which speak to the minimum day requirements for school districts and COEs. We thought it would be helpful to illustrate a scenario that steps out both the daily and annual instructional minute requirements for school districts. In this scenario, a school district schedules TK classes for 180 minutes a day across 180 instructional days. The question is, would this schedule meet all of the instructional time requirements? The answer is, while the days of instruction meet the minimum daily minute requirement, meaning they will count towards the annual day and minute requirements, without additional minutes added throughout the school year, the annual minute requirement of 36,000 minutes would not be met. To be clear, grade spans that are scheduled for only the minimum daily instructional minute requirement will not meet the annual instructional minute requirement. And if the school does not meet the instructional time requirements, they would be out of compliance with statute and subject to a fiscal penalty for the affected grade levels. Please note that the annual instructional time requirements are not waivable by the SBE. However, statute does provide authority to the SBE to waive fiscal penalties for not meeting annual instructional time requirements if the LEA makes up twice the instructional time they failed to offer. As stated earlier, the school year starts on July 1 and ends on June 30. The governing board of the school district has the authority to create and approve the school calendar. LEAs can adopt a single district-wide calendar or a calendar for each school site. A school month consists of 20 days or 4 weeks of 5 days each, including legal holidays. ADA is reported in full months. For school districts and COEs, the school week consists of 5 days, Monday to Friday. The authority to operate a 4-day school week must be provided for in statute. When school days are offered, it is for the purpose of meeting the requirements for the entire school year, which is 175 and 180 school days for charter schools and school districts, respectively. There is not a formal summer school program for apportionment purposes unless an LEA is operating an extended school year program. To generate ADA during the summer months need to be part of a full school year. We've included the table from slide 12 here as a reminder of the annual instructional minutes that must be provided to students for a charter school to claim ADA. To be clear, a charter school that operates a multi-track calendar must provide this number of instructional minutes for each track. If a student enrolls into a charter school during the summer months, that student should be placed in a track operated by the charter school for a minimum of 175 days of instruction, as well as the required number of annual minutes. If a charter school only intends to offer students school days during the summer months, they are not meeting this requirement. To ensure compliance with ADA and instructional time requirements, charter schools and their authorizers should review summer enrollment policies. A charter school claiming ADA for apportionment for an instructional program that does not offer the minimum required instructional days and minutes in a school year may be subject to disallowed ADA and the associated fiscal penalties. The governing board of the LEA has the authority to determine the length of the school day. Both school calendars and bell schedules are used to verify classroom-based instructional time compliance as a part of each school's annual audit. The annual audit will confirm that the instructional time requirements are being met. If the LEA does not meet the conditions of statute, the LEA shall be subject to the associated statutory penalties. Recess may be included for TK in kindergarten if students are under the immediate supervision and control of a certificated employee of the LEA. Passing time may be used when students are changing instructors and/or courses. Passing time is the actual time it takes to move from class to class and does not include time for going to a locker or the bathroom. SB 328 added EC section 46148, which requires all charter schools and non-rural school districts to begin the school day at their middle and high schools no earlier than 8 or 8:30 a.m. respectively. Instructional time and attendance credit cannot be claimed for apportionment or instruction offered before the newly established start time. LEAs should consult with their legal counsel regarding the applicability of the bill's provisions to their programs. As mentioned briefly on the previous slide, instructional time and attendance credit cannot be claimed for apportionment for instruction offered before the newly established start time. In practical terms, this means that optional zero periods offered at non-rural school district and charter middle or high schools before 8 and 8:30 a.m. are not included in the instructional time calculations and are not included in ADA calculations. EC Section 49056 requires public elementary school LEAs that offer recess to provide at least 30 minutes on regular instructional days and at least 15 minutes on early release days. Recess is defined as a period of time during the school day, separate and distinct from physical education courses and meal times, when students are given supervised and unstructured time for physical activity, play, organized games, and social engagement with peers. Recess time does not have to be offered in a single session and therefore may be offered via multiple sessions throughout the school day. Statutory requirements have not changed with regard to the instructional time requirements. With the exception of TK and kindergarten, recess is not included in instructional time calculations and may only be included if students are under the immediate supervision and control of a certificated employee. Additionally, EC Section 49056 prohibits school staff members from restricting a student's recess unless there is an immediate threat to the physical safety of the student or the physical safety of one or more of the student's peers. If a student's recess period is denied, school staff members shall make all reasonable efforts to resolve such threats and minimize exclusion from recess. As a reminder, this law only applies to those public elementary school districts, COEs, and charter schools that include recess in their instructional time schedules. Moreover, LEAs have authority to determine which grade levels will be provided recess. CDE recommends, if LEAs offer recess, that they evaluate their bell schedules and instructional minute offerings to ensure compliance with the instructional time requirements and avoid any potential audit finding and penalty. Instructional time requirements are included in each school's annual audit. As such, our team has compiled this best practice checklist to ensure that instructional time requirements are being met. Number 1, confirm the calculation of annual instructional minutes for the school year. Number 2, review bell schedules for each school site. All school sites must meet the day and minute requirements. Number 3, ensure that students are offered a full range of classes. Remember that a 0 or 7th optional period must include enough class options so there is sufficient breadth and quantity of classes to constitute a true offering, and does not, for example, only offer AP classes, band, or advanced art. Also remember that SB 328 allows a non-rural district or charter school from disallows, a non-rural district or charter school from including the instructional minutes of any class period at a middle school before 8 a.m. and high school before 8:30 a.m. Number 4, verify that any passing time is for the actual time it takes to pass between different classrooms. Passing time shall not exceed 10 minutes. LEAs can claim passing time before or after lunch, but not both. LEAs cannot claim breaks or lunch periods. Number 5, ensure any exceptions to student offerings, such as students participating in dual enrollment, meet the instructional time requirements. And number 6, verify that instructional time is provided by a certificated employee of the LEA. Instructional time requirements that are verified during the annual audit for school districts and charter schools include the annual day requirement, the annual minute requirement, optional classes, and the multi-track calendar. The daily instructional minute requirement is only verified for school districts during the annual audit, as it does not apply to charter schools. The penalties for not meeting the instructional time requirements are different for school districts and charter schools. As a reminder, school district annual day penalties in EC sections 41420 and 46208 are calculated separately from the school district annual minute penalties in EC section 46207B. A charter school's total apportionment is proportionately reduced for each school day less than 175. What does not count as instructional time in a school day? To begin, any time spent under the supervision of a classified employee does not count towards the instructional time requirements, nor does recess in any other grade apart from TK or kindergarten. For TK and kindergarten, recess time may only count towards the instructional minutes if the students are under the immediate supervision and control of a certificated employee of the LEA. Nutrition breaks, in-service days, commonly known as staff development days, and makeup instruction, which includes both Saturday school and attendance recovery programs, do not count as instructional time. Additionally, enrichment programs such as expanded learning opportunity programs, after-school programs, and summer school do not count as instructional time. Other times that do not count as instructional time include restricted educational offerings, such as optional zero periods, where only classes such as band, sports, or advanced art are offered. Instruction offered during lunch, instruction that conflicts with the transportation schedule, and instruction that does not meet the requirements of SB 328 do not count as instructional time. Where applicable, passing periods between programs also do not count towards the instructional time requirements. An example of this would be when a dually enrolled student moves from a class on a high school campus to a class on a community college campus. The Principal Apportionment Section, PACE, is responsible for the calculation and allocation of funds through the principal apportionment, which includes funding for the Local Control Funding Formula, LCFF, the primary source of an LEA's general purpose funding, special education, and funding for several other programs. The majority of LCFF funding is based on ADA. In order for ADA to count for state funding, LEAs must meet a significant number of statutory requirements, which include, but aren't limited to, instructional time requirements. Each requirement is distinct with its own fiscal consequences. Attendance and instructional time requirements vary by type of LEA, educational setting, and grade span. LEAs take attendance for two purposes: compulsory attendance and attendance for apportionment. Attendance for apportionment must meet the requirements in law. Examples of this are when students are offered the required number of days and minutes, and when students are under the immediate supervision and control of a certificated employee of the LEA. LEAs can only generate ADA in two ways: through in-person instruction or independent study. LEAs must keep records of student attendance to show compliance during their annual audit in order to avoid fiscal penalties. School districts and COEs are required to have an attendance supervisor who is responsible for supervising the attendance of students and who can be used as a resource. The formula for computing ADA is the number of days of student attendance divided by the number of calendar days school was taught. The next few slides highlight notable funding requirements that must be met in order to generate ADA. These slides provide a high-level overview and do not address every specific condition of apportionment. Notable funding requirements include instructional time, attendance, and supervision. The instructional time requirements include a full annual offering of minutes and days. For school districts, this includes daily scheduling requirements. Charter schools do not have minimum day requirements. As mentioned earlier, attendance for apportionment is either generated in person or through an independent study program. For independent study, the attendance is based on work product and synchronous instruction, if applicable, or satisfactory educational progress in certified courses. For in-person instruction, the student must be engaged in educational activities required of them. The supervision requirement for in-person instruction is that the student must be under the immediate supervision and control of a certificated employee of the LEA. The supervision requirement for independent study instruction is that the student must be under the general supervision and control of a certificated employee of the LEA. There are different age eligibility requirements depending on where the student is enrolled and in what program the student is participating. For school districts, there's no maximum age unless the student is participating in independent study or special education. For charter schools, Students over the age of 19 must be continuously enrolled in public school, making satisfactory educational progress towards a high school diploma, and shall not be over the age of 22. For independent study, students that are continuously enrolled in a school district or COE cannot generate independent study ADA over the age of 21 years. Students that have been continuously enrolled in a charter school shall not generate independent study ADA over the age of 22 years. And students at any LEA that have not been continuously enrolled since their 18th birthday can only generate independent study ADA until they are 19. The residency requirements also depend on the type of school and program in which the student is enrolled and participating. For school districts, the student must be a resident of the district unless an exception is provided for in law. For charter schools, the student must be a resident of California. For independent study, the student must be a resident of the county or adjacent county. The immunization requirement will be checked for compliance during the annual audit. Students must receive appropriate immunizations to participate in in-person instruction in California public schools. Conditional admission is permitted only if the requirements of CCR Title 17, Section 6035 are met. Immunization requirements are not applicable for students with IEPs and students who do not receive classroom-based instruction. There are ADA limitations that will be checked during the annual audit. Each student cannot generate more than 1 day of attendance per day. Additionally, some ADA is not fundable, such as excess independent study ADA and continuation and opportunity education independent study ADA over the 10% threshold. ADA is the core variable in a series of calculations known as the principal apportionment. This includes LCFF, which is the primary source of an LEA's general purpose funds. Other ADA-based programs include special education, ELOP, and the TK add-on, among others. The flow of state funding is adjusted throughout the year as data becomes available. ADA is reported cumulatively 3 times a year. The ADA report of the second principal apportionment, known as P2, is the input for the LCFF and most other programs. P2 reporting is due by May 1st and comprises all full attendance months that end on or before April 15th. Attendance reported at the P2 period therefore has the greatest effect on an LEA's unrestricted entitlements. Lottery and a few other programs use annual ADA, which is reported in July and includes attendance for the entire fiscal year.
The Attendance Recovery Program was established in the 24-25 legislative session to alleviate the effect of chronic absenteeism on academic continuity and school funding. Attendance recovery, or AR, programs can help LEAs increase access to instruction and mitigate ADA loss due to absenteeism. In prior years, the chance to offer makeup classes was only available to school districts and COEs through Saturday school. Starting in this fiscal year, charter schools are now able to make up past absences for the purpose of apportionment by operating an AR program. New statute on AR does not affect the ability of school districts and COEs to offer Saturday school. As a voluntary program, LEAs will decide locally whether to offer AR and how to schedule it. An AR program cannot be mandatory for any student, regardless of their truancy status. Statute allows for the use of ELOP funds to support AR when conditions are met. LEAs may only offer AR to students who are enrolled in a classroom-based program. LEAs must meet several requirements to generate ADA through AR, including supervision by certificated employees of the LEA at specified student-teacher ratios. These conditions are verified in the annual audit process. The maximum amount of ADA that can be recovered is capped at 10 days per student, or a student's total absences for the year, whichever is fewer. ADA generated by AR can only be applied to absences that occurred in the same fiscal year. AR sessions do not count toward regular instructional time. The program does not alter how attendance is taken for the purpose of compulsory education. LEAs may offer sessions before or after school, during weekends, or on intersession breaks, and students may accrue participation time by the hour. AR participation can occur before the student is absent. The next few slides will go into more detail about each of these topics. AR programs will be open to students from TK through 12th grade. Most students at most LEAs are eligible to participate, including school districts, COEs, and classroom-based charter schools. Non-classroom-based charter schools and charter schools operating under a special partnership are not eligible. AR cannot be used as punishment. LEAs cannot require a student to participate, and there is no fee for participation. Students cannot participate in an AR program remotely or through independent study, as in-person instruction is a condition of apportionment. A student is considered to be participating in long-term independent study in a school district or enrolled in a non-classroom-based program in a charter school when they are participating continually in traditional independent study for 16 or more school days. A student who participated in long-term independent study earlier in the year but is currently receiving instruction in a regular classroom-based program is eligible for AR. AR programs occur outside of the regular day of instruction. As such, they cannot operate during recess or meal times during the school day. AR programs may operate before the start of the regular school day and even before the earliest start times of school districts under EC Section 46148. Participation time in AR may be accrued before a student is absent. This includes the period between July 1st and the first day of school. This participation can count towards ADA if the student is absent later in the same fiscal year. However, LEAs can only claim AR ADA for an absence after the absence has occurred. AR is optional for LEAs to offer. If an LEA elects to provide AR to a student, statute states that they must have access to it at least once during each school term, such as every semester or quarter. However, LEAs do not need to provide access for all grade levels each term or to every student in a grade level. In enacting the policy, the legislature emphasized the need for evidence-based strategies to increase instructional time, especially for more vulnerable and high-need students. After determining whether to offer AR and which students are eligible, the next step is to understand the apportionment significant requirements. We'll start with supervision. The same in-person supervision requirements of regular classroom-based instruction apply to AR, as well as maximum student-to-teacher ratios. AR instruction must be substantially equivalent to regular instruction and aligned with content standards. To generate a day of ADA, a student must first log enough hours to meet the minimum day requirement that applies. Because AR allows for a makeup day to be met piecemeal, for example, over multiple before or after school sessions, students can accrue participation time in increments of 1 hour. The LEA must track AR attendance separately from regular school day attendance. AR programs must maintain a student to certificated employee ratio of 10:1 for TK and kindergarten and 20:1 for all other grades. Students in AR must be under the immediate supervision and control of a certificated employee of the LEA. Third-party vendors may not supervise AR. If an employee is qualified to teach in a TK classroom through 12 classroom during the regular school day, they will meet the supervision requirements for AR. A best practice is for AR teachers supervising TK students to meet the TK teacher qualification requirements under EC Section 48000 G4. However, it is not required and non-compliance will not affect funding. For questions about specific certification requirements for TK through 12 instruction, the CDE recommends that LEAs consult directly with the CTC. Students generate attendance for apportionment through AR when they are engaged in educational activities that are substantially equivalent to a student's regular program and are aligned to the content standards of the student's grade level. This may include one-on-one or small group tutoring. Students with IEPs may participate if AR is consistent with the goals in their IEP. When a student's plan specifies an alternate minimum school day length, that length of time also applies for their AR participation. A student generates a full day of attendance through AR once they have participated for the minimum length of school day per their grade span or instructional setting. The minimum instructional day requirements by grade span that apply to school districts will apply to all LEAs, including charter schools, for the purpose of AR programs. The instructional day requirements for county community schools, continuation high schools, juvenile court schools, and community day schools apply when students in these settings participate in AR. As LEAs adjust their record-keeping systems to incorporate an AR program, they must take into account whether the individual has an alternative minimum day per their IEP. For the purpose of generating ADA through AR, the minimum day requirements for school districts and COEs also apply to charter schools. To be clear, charter school students will have to participate for the instructional minutes required by grade span, as shown here, in order to recoup a day of attendance. There is a cap on the total attendance that can be earned by a student through AR in a fiscal year. The amount of ADA that can be claimed for a student is capped at the lesser of 10 days of attendance or the total number of absences the student accrued that year. When a student is not present because they are legally excluded from school, such as for a suspension or for lack of immunization records, the absence cannot be made up through either AR or Saturday school. No more than 1 day of AR attendance may be claimed per calendar day of participation. AR sessions are not included in instructional time for the purpose of meeting annual day and minute requirements. LEAs need to track days of attendance generated through AR separately from all other attendance. A whole day of AR attendance can be claimed once the applicable minimum day requirement is met, up to the student cap. It is possible to meet the applicable requirement in a single calendar day. For example, a high school student may participate in AR for 4 hours on a Saturday to make up an absence. Otherwise, the student may meet the minimum day requirement over multiple days in increments of 1 hour. For example, a high school student could make up a day by attending an after-school AR program for 1 hour a day on 4 days. When a student participates for an increment of less than 1 hour, participation time does not accrue. Fractions of an hour are not prorated and do not carry forward. In the annual audit, the AR teacher's attendance record is used to substantiate the hours that a student participated. The procedure to verify the AR attendance record is described in the audit guide. Our office recommends that LEAs consult with their independent auditor and SIS vendor to ensure appropriate record keeping for ADA compliance. This slide reviews the steps to generate attendance through AR. To receive ADA credit, the student must have accrued an absence. As noted earlier, the absence may occur after the AR participation. A student generates 1 day of attendance once the attendance record shows they have participated in AR for enough hours to meet the applicable minimum day. When the LEA determines that the student has met the time requirement, a make-up attendance credit of 1 full day is applied to the attendance month month when the student was absent. This is similar to how Saturday school statute applies. Since AR does not affect attendance kept for compulsory education purposes or the chronic absenteeism rate, the original absence must remain unchanged in the attendance register. LEAs will claim AR attendance by including it in the regular ADA totals reported to the PADC web application. AR ADA will also be reported separately from all other ADA. In the coming months, the PADC user manual will be updated to include more explicit instruction on how to report AR ADA. LEAs may begin claiming AR attendance starting with the P1 reporting period. P1 reporting is due by January 15th, 2026 for all full attendance months completed on or before December 31st. Beginning in fiscal year 25-26, the annual audit process will verify the conditions of apportionment shown here. LEAs that report any amount of AR/ADA will be audited for compliance with the following: the student cap on the amount of ADA that can be claimed annually, separate tracking of AR days in the attendance records, the minimum day requirements and documentation of AR hours, supervision by a certificated employee and student-teacher ratio requirements, alignment of instructional content to grade level standards, and the exclusion of non-classroom-based students. Our last AR slide presents some considerations for LEAs that are offering AR alongside ELOP. When LEAs operate both programs at the same time, the requirements for each program must be met separately. For example, AR hours do not count towards meeting the statutory requirement for the daily length of ELOP. AR must be offered as an additional option for students that operates parallel to existing ELOP enrichment activities. Students who participate in AR retain the ability to participate in ELOP offered throughout the year. An LEA cannot assign students into one program at the exclusion of the other. In addition, statute allows for ELOP funding to be used to support AR when both programs are offered at the same time and at the same school site. In this case, if ELOP is operated by a third-party vendor, the AR program must still be operated by the LEA. The CDE's guidance is to revise ELOP plans to reflect how the funding will support AR when funds are used in this way. We'll now hand it off to Carrie to discuss independent study.
This section highlights the requirements and recent changes to independent study. Independent study is an optional educational program which LEAs may choose but are not required to offer. When independent study is offered, it must be voluntary and include a classroom option for those students wishing to participate. Short-term independent study is intended to maintain the continuity of education, for example, when a student goes on a family vacation. Long-term independent study is an alternative to in-person instruction. Students in long-term independent study are typically participating for a semester or a year of instruction. Independent study is a viable educational alternative, particularly when parts of the state are experiencing a loss of attendance due to immigration enforcement. All students in independent study must be offered the minimum annual instructional minutes and days that apply to their grade level and setting. All conditions of apportionment must be met in order to claim attendance for independent study. Compliance with statutory requirements will be checked during the annual audit. Independent study may be offered via traditional or course-based independent study, or CBIS. Traditional independent study ADA is based on the time value of the student's work product, or the time value of the student's work product and their participation in synchronous instruction and meeting all the apportioned significant requirements. LEAs are only able to count participation in synchronous instruction towards the instructional time and ADA calculations if it meets the conditions of EC Section 51747.5. A certificated employee of the LEA must determine and evaluate the time value of the work product, or the combined time value of the work product and student participation in synchronous instruction for each student participating in traditional independent study. Please note that an LEA may only claim apportionment credit insofar as a student's participation in a synchronous instructional offering augments the time value of student work products. This means that synchronous instructional time can only be counted in addition to, not as a replacement for, asynchronous work. For school districts and COEs, students must complete a work product that is at least the equivalent in time value to a minimum day of school of attendance in a classroom setting. For charter schools, students must complete a work product that equates to a full day of school as determined by a certificated employee of the charter school. Additionally, charter schools are required to have a daily engagement record. CBIS is based on enrollment and satisfactory educational progress in courses that are annually certified by the LEA's local governing board. If all other apportionment significant requirements are met, ADA can be generated through CBIS. A certificated employee of the LEA or of an LEA that has a memorandum of understanding must provide general supervision of the student's CBIS program. Students must be enrolled and making satisfactory educational progress in certified courses that meet minimum day requirements. The annual course certification includes instructional time and course credits. This information shall be consistent with that of equivalent classroom-based courses. The next two slides cover the independent study eligibility criteria that apply to students at school districts, COEs, and charter schools. The conditions shown on this slide must be met for a student to generate ADA through independent study at any LEA. Students must always be enrolled at a school and placed in a grade level. Independent study is always voluntary. All students must have the option of classroom instruction. When a student is expelled, they are not eligible for independent study unless they have been allowed to return to the classroom. Students must be residents of the same county as the LEA claiming the ADA, or of an adjacent county. If a student has an IEP, the IEP must explicitly state that independent study is an appropriate method of delivering instruction for that student. Otherwise, the student is not eligible to participate and will not generate ADA through independent study. ADA may not be generated for full-time independent study if a student is enrolled based on a parent or guardian work location. There are distinctions between the maximum age requirements for students enrolled at a school district or COE who are participating in independent study and for students participating in non-classroom-based instruction at charter schools. Students over 21 cannot generate independent study ADA if they are enrolled in a school district or COE. If a school district or COE student has not been continuously enrolled since turning 18, they will only generate independent study ADA until they turn 19. Charter school students that have been continuously enrolled since their 18th birthday and are making satisfactory educational progress towards a high school diploma may participate in an independent study program until they are 22. Charter school students that are enrolled in an exclusive partnership program are exempt from the age eligibility requirements, although other requirements, such as residency, still apply. While students enrolled at continuation and opportunity schools and programs may participate in independent study, they are subject to a 10% cap on the amount of ADA that can be claimed through independent study instruction. Let's take a closer look at the foundational requirements for both traditional independent study and CBIS, beginning with board policies. Both models require board-adopted policies that are statutorily compliant. These policies are reviewed during the annual audit. Supervision. In order for ADA to be generated in independent study, instruction must take place under the general supervision of a certificated employee of the LEA. Voluntary participation. Participation in independent study must be voluntary for all students. Classroom option. All students participating in independent study must be offered a classroom-based instructional alternative. Agreement duration. Written agreements for both traditional independent study and CBIS must not exceed 1 school year. This ensures that agreements are revisited annually and remain current. Attendance limits. Both models allow for a maximum of 1 day of attendance to be generated per student per day. This prevents independent study from being used to make up missed attendance. Make up attendance. Independent study cannot be used as a make-up attendance program. This reinforces the principle that independent study is an instructional model, not a substitute for missed instruction. Now, let's look at 2 requirements that apply only to traditional independent study. Time value of work. ADA is generated when the time value of student work products meets the applicable minimum day as determined by a certificated employee of the LEA. Live and synchronous instruction. Time spent in synchronous or live instruction can augment the time value of student work products. Here are some additional requirements. Courses certified annually. CBIS requires that courses be certified annually by the governing board or body. Written agreements. Both traditional and CBIS require compliant written agreements. For long-term independent study, defined as 16 or more cumulative days, the agreement must be signed by all applicable parties prior to the start of instruction. For short-term independent study, which is for 15 or fewer cumulative days, the signed agreement may be collected during the same school year. Board policy on fees. Both traditional independent study and CBIS must have a board policy stating that no prohibited fees are assessed to participating students. Synchronous instruction and ADA. It's important to note that synchronous instruction alone does not generate ADA in either traditional independent study or CBIS. Evidence of student engagement. Traditional independent study requires LEAs to maintain written or computer-based evidence of student engagement, such as gradebooks or a summary document listing all assignments, assessments, and grades. Samples of student work. Similarly, traditional independent study requires retention of student work samples. ADA and satisfactory progress. For CBIS, ADA is generated only when students are making satisfactory educational progress in their courses and meeting the minimum instructional minute requirements. Documentation of progress. CBIS requires documentation of satisfactory progress in each course. This includes grades, assessments, assignment completion, and other academic indicators. Student Parent Educator Conferences. Both models require a plan for conferences involving the student, parent or guardian, and educator if the student is not making satisfactory academic progress. Daily engagement logs for charter schools. Charter schools participating in both models must maintain a daily engagement log to document student participation in educational activities. Tiered re-engagement procedures. Both models must have tiered re-engagement procedures in place to address a lack of student participation or academic progress. Statewide assessment reporting. Statewide assessment results must be reported for students in both models in accordance with applicable state requirements. And this is our final slide on independent study requirements. Course exclusivity. Courses required for high school graduation or for admission to the UC CSU systems cannot be offered exclusively through independent study. This ensures students have equitable access to essential coursework. Content standards. All course content delivered through independent study must align with grade level standards. This maintains instructional rigor and consistency across both models. Prohibited incentives. LEAs may not offer money or other items of value to students or guardians participating in independent study beyond what is provided to regularly enrolled students. The only exceptions are software and connectivity resources necessary for participation. Residency requirements. Students must reside within the county or an adjacent county where apportionment is claimed. This applies to both models. We have now reviewed the key requirements for both traditional independent study and CVIS. Next, we will shift our focus to several independent study highlights. First, we will review ADA computation. Accurate calculation of ADA is essential. Missteps here can directly impact funding, so it's important to understand how ADA is generated and validated in independent study. Next, we will focus on ADA documentation and record keeping. Documentation must support ADA claims. This includes maintaining complete and accessible records that demonstrate student engagement, instructional time, and compliance with written agreements. A reminder that independent study is not a makeup attendance program. Independent study should not be used to retroactively recover attendance for missed in-person instruction. It is a distinct instructional strategy with its own compliance requirements. And finally, a reminder about short-term written agreements. This slide shows the method in which LEAs compute a day of attendance in independent study. Time spent in online programs can be counted as student work products and can be combined with synchronous instructional time to meet the minimum school day requirement for ADA. LEAs will add the time value of student work products, including any documented time spent in online programs and synchronous instruction. If the sum meets the minimum school day requirement and all other requirements are met, LEAs may credit 1 day of attendance. This calculation cannot result in more than 1 unit of ADA per student per day, and an LEA may only claim ADA insofar as a student's participation in a synchronous instructional offering augments the time value of a student work product. This slide outlines an example of how ADA is computed for a school district or COE offering independent study. Let's break down the calculation on the left. The first step involves determining the time value of student work products. This includes the time value of tangible work products created by the student, as well as the time spent in asynchronous instruction, such as online or computer-based programs, where students don't produce a tangible work product. Next, we add the time value of documented synchronous instruction. Once again, we emphasize that this time value must augment the asynchronous work. These two sums are then added together to get the time value of traditional independent study total in hours. Finally, we divide this total time by the number of hours in a minimum day, which varies by grade span. The result is the total number of days of attendance for the student. Now let's look at a concrete example on the right. The student spent 5 hours in documented online asynchronous instruction. In this case, there was no tangible work product, but the work was verified by a certificated teacher. The student also spent 25 hours creating tangible work products. Adding these together and then adding 6 hours of documented synchronous instruction, we get a total time value of 36 hours for independent study. For grades 4 through 12, the minimum instructional day is 4 hours. So we divide 36 hours by 4. This gives us 9 days of attendance. This example illustrates how both asynchronous and synchronous learning, along with tangible work products, are accounted for in ADA calculations. Accurate documentation of student work and instructional time is critical for proper ADA reporting. The minimum instructional day requirement is a key factor in determining the number of attendance days. This slide provides an example of how ADA is calculated specifically for charter schools offering non-classroom based instruction. Again, we'll start with a calculation process on the left. The first step is to determine the time value of student work products, which includes the time value of tangible work products created by the student, as well as the time documented for asynchronous instruction, like online or computer-based programs where students don't produce a tangible work product. We then add the time value of documented synchronous instruction, which can only augment this asynchronous work time. This sum gives the time value of non-classroom based instruction total in hours. Next, we look at the student engagement log. This log documents the days that the student was actively involved in educational activities. Finally, the teacher determines the number of days that the total hours equates to based on the engagement log and the time value of instruction. This final determination yields the total number of days of attendance for the student. Now let's look at the specific example provided on the right. The student spent 5 hours on documented online asynchronous instruction. No tangible work product was produced, but the activity was verified by a certificated teacher. The student also spent 10 hours creating tangible work products. Adding these and then adding 3 hours of documented synchronous instruction, we get a total time value of 18 hours for non-classroom based instruction. The student engagement log shows that the student was engaged in educational activities for 5 days. Based on this engagement log and the time value, the teacher determined that the total hours equate to 5 days of attendance. Therefore, the student has generated 5 days of attendance. Now that we have discussed the way in which school districts, COEs, and charter schools should calculate a day of attendance for independent study, we will discuss this documentation requirements for that ADA computation. In order to claim ADA for independent study, a certificated employee of the LEA must document each hour or fraction of an hour for all independent study instruction, including the time value of student work product, asynchronous instruction, and synchronous instruction as applicable. The certificated employee, designated as providing general supervision, determines a day of attendance based on this documentation. Failure to properly document independent study instruction may result in a noncompliance finding during the annual audit and an associated loss of apportionment. The method for documenting the time value of student work or the time value of student work product and participation in synchronous instruction is through the supervising teacher's record book or register. The record book is the basis of apportionment and academic credit that the supervising teacher is required to keep for each student. The record book should include a comprehensive list of all assignments due and meetings held with the student. It is used in place of classroom attendance for the purpose of generating ADA. As a record of ADA and funding, record books must be kept for 3 years. LEAs must maintain contemporaneous attendance records by documenting each day a student is present or absent. An absence occurs when a student does not attend school or participate in independent study. School districts and COEs can recoup an absence for funding purposes by offering in-person Saturday school. All LEAs may begin offering an AR program this year. LEAs cannot use independent study as a method to make up attendance once an absence has occurred and been recorded. The following slides illustrate 3 examples of how an LEA may handle student absences. In this example, student A attends school on Monday but becomes ill and is absent from in-person instruction on Tuesday. The LEA records Tuesday as an absence in the attendance register. If the student is enrolled at a school district or COE, the school can recover the absence for funding purposes via Saturday school. All LEAs can recover the absence for funding purposes through an AR program. In this example, student B attends school on Monday, but becomes ill and is absent from in-person instruction on Tuesday. On Tuesday, the LEA offers and provides independent study to student B. If the student agrees to participate and all other conditions of apportionment are met, the LEA records Tuesday as a day of independent study attendance in the register. In this example, student C attends school on Monday, but becomes ill and misses in-person instruction on Tuesday. The LEA did not provide independent study to student C on Tuesday. Because the student did not attend in-person instruction or participate in independent study, the LEA must record Tuesday as an absence in the attendance register. If the LEA provides independent study to the student after they return, it is for academic credit only. ADA cannot be earned retroactively, as a student cannot generate more than 1 day of attendance in a school day. Please see Wednesday as an example. Since 24-25, LEAs have been able to collect signed written agreements for short-term independent study at any time during the same school year. A written agreement may be signed at the start of the year, but a signed supplementary agreement with specific details, like dates of participation, is required for each instance of short-term independent study. Best practice is that LEAs include the written agreement in back-to-school paperwork and prepare supplementary agreements when short-term independent study is requested. Importantly, all independent study requirements must be met from the first day of participation, regardless of when the agreement is signed. Each written agreement must be signed by all applicable parties, including the student's parent, legal guardian, or caregiver, if the student is less than 18 years old, the certificated employee designated as having responsibility for the general supervision of independent study, and if applicable, the certificated employee designated as having responsibility for special education programming. As we end our independent study overview, we would like to leave you with several considerations as LEAs carefully plan their independent study programs. LEAs are required to maintain board policies that reflect the written agreement requirements for short and long-term independent study, as well as the current definitions of short and long-term participation. The policies should clarify that there is no minimum duration required for participation in independent study. Written agreements for long-term independent study, 16 or more cumulative days, must be signed before the student begins participation. For short-term independent study, 15 or fewer cumulative days, written agreements may be collected at any time during the same school year. LEAs should ensure that all statutory required elements are included in their written agreements. Minimum instructional time requirements must be met in order to receive ADA generated by students participating in independent study. LEAs must meet minimum instructional time requirements for each student based on grade level. They must also accurately calculate and document instructional time, including the time value of student work products and synchronous instruction. For students participating in online or computer-based programs, LEAs must document the time that is recorded for the student by the online or computer-based program. Accurate reporting of ADA is crucial for receiving the appropriate funding. All LEAs offering independent study must calculate and report their independent study ratio annually at the time of P2 reporting, and must accurately report all ADA, including any excess ADA, in the PADC web application. For charter schools, if the ADA population is more than 20% non-classroom based, the charter school must have a funding determination approved by the SBE. Continuation and opportunity schools must adhere to the 10% cap on independent study ADA. Now I'm going to hand it over to Lauren to discuss transitional kindergarten.
This section outlines the requirements for transitional kindergarten upon full implementation in fiscal year 25-26. In fiscal year 25-26, TK is fully implemented, and there's only one type of TK student. Beginning this year, a child who will have their 4th birthday by September 1st shall be admitted to a TK program maintained by a school district or charter school. All TK students generate ADA from the first day of school. In this TK age eligibility scenario, the first day of school is August 13th. A student is enrolled into a TK program whose birthday is on August 27th, which is before September 1st, but after the first day of instruction. The question is, when can the LEA start claiming ADA for this TK student? The answer is, the LEA can start claiming ADA for the student on the first day of school. Students that turn 4 by September 1st generate ADA for the purpose of funding beginning the first day of the school year. To be clear, in order to participate in public school, all students must meet the age eligibility requirements provided for in statute. Education Code Section 48,000 C1G requires all students enrolled in a TK program to be 4 years of age by September 1st. Upon full implementation, there will be a 1 to 10 adult to student ratio in TK classrooms. The 1 to 10 adult to student ratio for fiscal year 25-26 is now based on an average by school site. Also beginning this year, legislature increased the TK add-on with the intention of supporting the costs of the change from the prior 1 to 12 ratio requirement to the new 1 to 10 ratio requirement. The average class size requirement per school site in TK classrooms is still 24 students. Beginning August 1st, 2025, statute required certificated teachers assigned to a TK classroom and teachers providing independent study instruction to TK students in school districts and charter schools to meet at least one of the following options: 24 units in early childhood education, childhood development, or both, professional experience in a classroom setting with preschool-age children that is comparable to the 24 units, a child development teacher permit, or an early childhood education specialist credential issued by the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. As a reminder, the teacher credentialing requirements are included in the annual audit for all schools providing TK programs beginning this year. To summarize, the apportionment significant requirements for TK classrooms beginning in fiscal year 25-26 include the class size average maximum of 24 students, the adult to student ratio of 1 adult per 10 TK students, the TK classroom staffing requirement of 1 certificated employee and 2 assigned adults in the classroom. The 2 additional adults must be employees of the school district or charter school who are dedicated and available to all TK students for the duration of their time in the TK classroom. Prior to this year, the TK average class size penalty was calculated by multiplying all of the school districts or charter schools' P2 TK ADA by the current year's TK to 3 GSA rate. Beginning this year, the average class size penalty will be calculated using P2 ADA for the school site that fails to maintain an average TK enrollment of not more than 24 students. The P2 ADA for a school site is determined by the entity's CDS code. It is possible for a charter school to have multiple locations but be considered one school site because the charter school has one CDS code. The TK average class size penalty will now be calculated by multiplying the affected school site or school sites, P2 ADA, by the current year's TK through 3 GSA. What does this mean in practice? This slide looks at the 25-26 class size penalty for a school district with multiple school sites. ABC School District has 5 school sites and 5 corresponding CDS codes. One of ABC's school sites exceeds the TK class size enrollment requirement of 24. While ABC District's P2 reported TK ADA is 120, the affected school site reported TK P2 ADA was 24.5. Therefore, the penalty calculation for the affected school site is 24.5 multiplied by 1,067, which is the 25-26 GSA rate, which would equate to a penalty of $26,142. For XYZ Charter School, which has 5 locations and only one CDS code, the class size penalty would be calculated as follows. If one of XYZ Charter School's 5 locations exceeded the enrollment requirement, all of XYZ's Charter School's ADA is considered affected because all of the locations fall under one CDS code. The penalty calculation for XYZ Charter School would be 120 multiplied by 1,067, which would result in a fine of $128,040. SFSD's TK FAQs can be found on the CDE website listed on the slide here for your reference. The URL is www.cde.ca.gov/fg/it/TK Fiscal FAQ.asp. The TK compliance calculator is also listed on this slide for reference. Please note that the penalty calculator is used to estimate the cost of a TK audit finding, and it has been updated for the TK 1 to 10 adult to student ratio and teacher certification. The penalty calculator for average class size will be updated in the coming months. The URL for the TK compliance calculator is www.cde.ca.gov/FG/AU/AG/penaltycalc.asp. Handing it back over to Carrie to review the Form J13A and instructional continuity requirements.
This portion of the webinar discusses the Form J13A used by LEAs facing emergency situations that disrupt instructional time. We will cover the basics of the form, its funding implications, the submission process, and significant legislative updates set to take effect in the upcoming fiscal years. In the case of emergencies, statute provides authority for a process for the State Superintendent of Public Instruction to approve a waiver of the instructional time requirements in the event of school closures and a waiver for material decreases in ADA. The stated purpose of this process is to ensure that LEAs receive the same apportionment as they would have received had the unforeseen event not occurred. This process is known as the J13A process. If the CDE approves a Form J13A for school closure, the LEA is authorized to maintain school for less than the required instructional days and minutes without being assigned a fiscal penalty to their LCFF funding. When an LEA closes due to an emergency, the LEA does not lose funding. ADA is still calculated as days attended divided by days taught. An approved Form J13A provides LEAs with a waiver of instructional time requirements. While not all-inclusive, the table to the right shows both common approvable and non-approvable events. The next few slides provide a detailed look at how days of attendance are calculated during school closures and for material decreases in attendance for school districts and then charter schools. Let's begin with school districts. For school districts without a fixed divisor that calculate ADA based on days taught, LEAs will immediately reduce their divisor for any school closures when reporting P1, P2, or annual ADA to CDE, disregarding whether the Form J13A closure request has been approved or not, because it was not a day of instruction. For example, if an LEA was originally set to have 180 days of instruction, and as such their divisor was 180, to calculate ADA, they would have divided the number of days of actual attendance over 180 days taught. The LEA then experienced an unforeseen school closure for 3 days during the school year. They now need to reduce their divisor from 180 to 177 and calculate their ADA based on actual number of days attended over 177 days taught, whether or not their Form J13A request is approved. If their Form J13A request is approved, the LEA should keep the Form J13A approval letter to document the school's compliance with instructional time requirements, as the letter provides the authority to maintain school for less than the required annual instructional days and minutes without incurring a fiscal penalty. To reiterate, the purpose of a Form J13A waiver is to provide authority to maintain school for less than the required annual instructional days and minutes without incurring a fiscal penalty. The scenario in this slide demonstrates how a school closure at XYZ school district would not result in a loss of funding. Using a statewide absence rate of 8% and an enrollment population of 100 students, the school district would have 16,560 days of student attendance, which would then be divided by 180 days taught to equate to 92 ADA. If the school district experienced a 3-day emergency school closure, the district would have 16,284 days of attendance, which would be divided by the amount of school days taught of 177. This would still equal 92 ADA. As you can see, although XYZ school district experienced a 3-day emergency school closure, their ADA remained the same and XYZ school district would not incur a loss of funding. When XYZ school district submits a Form J13A request, they are requesting approval for 3 days of instructional time credit to prevent receiving a fiscal penalty associated with failing to meet the instructional time requirements during their annual audit. This slide addresses the funding impact specific to charter school closures. Similar to school districts, for any school closure, charter schools must reduce their divisor, which represents the days taught when reporting P1, P2, and annual ADA to CDE. This reduction is required regardless of the approval status of the Form J13A closure request, because a closure day does not constitute a day of instruction. As the example shows, the original calculation includes a divisor of 175 days, corresponding to the 175 annual day requirement for charter schools. If a 5-day closure occurs, the charter school should reduce their divisor by 5 because there was no instruction on those 5 days. This results in an adjusted divisor of 170 days. When the charter school calculates their ADA, they use this reduced divisor in their calculation. This scenario in this slide demonstrates how a school closure at XYZ charter school impacts their ADA calculation. Let's look at the initial situation for XYZ charter school with no closure. It has a student population of 100 with an average absence rate of 8%. This means 92 students are attending each day on average. Over the planned 175 instructional days, the total days of student attendance would be 92 students multiplied by 175 days, which equals 16,100 days. This total attendance of 16,100 days is then divided by the divisor of 175 days taught, which equates to 92 ADA. Now, consider the impact of an emergency school closure. XYZ charter school experiences a 5-day closure due to a snowstorm. As required, the charter school reduces its divisor, the days taught, from 175 down to 170. The total days of student attendance must also reflect the reduced number of instructional days. This is now calculated as 92 students attending per day multiplied by the adjusted 170 days taught, which equals 15,640 total attendance days. This adjusted attendance figure of 15,640 is then divided by the new divisor of 170 days taught. This calculation still results in 92 ADA. As you can see from this specific example, although XYZ charter school experienced a 5-day emergency school closure and correctly adjusted its divisor, their calculated ADA remained the same. In this instance, XYZ charter school would not see a change in its ADA funding figure based on the closure event. When the charter school reports its ADA in the PADC web application, they would exclude the school closure days from the total days of operation. Without a Form J13A approval, the CDE would proportionately reduce funded ADA if XYZ charter school operated for less than the required 175 days of instruction. Upon approval of a Form J13A school closure request, XYZ charter school would receive an instructional day and minute credit. This is done internally and does not require a corrected attendance file in the PADC web application. The credit will prevent a fiscal penalty for failure to meet the instructional time requirements. An LEA that calculates ADA using a fixed divisor should reduce their divisor only when CDE has approved the closure. Once the Form J13A approval letter has been received, the LEA should reduce their divisor or days taught by the days approved for the closure. After the ADA has been recalculated using the reduced divisor, the LEA should submit their revised ADA to CDE. For material decreases at all LEAs, LEAs will submit the actual attendance on the day of the emergency condition and should not make any adjustment to its ADA until the Form J13A approval letter has been received. Once the approval letter is received, the LEA will need to report the revised ADA in the PADC web application. We wanted to clarify the process for all Form J13As submitted for emergencies that will take place up to June 30th, 2026. When submitting a Form J13A to CDE, the LEA should complete all applicable sections of the form. The LEA should gather the signed certification form for independent study and a copy of the LEA's independent study plan. The certification form only needs to be provided with the LEA's first submission for each fiscal year. The LEA must include all necessary supporting documentation and include a school calendar. If a governor's declaration of emergency was in effect, a copy of that declaration should be included. The Form J13A can be submitted with wet, digital, or scanned wet signatures by a majority of the LEA's governing board members, the county superintendent, and witnesses for both the board members and the county superintendent. If the Form J13A is submitted for a charter school, the charter school's authorizer must also sign the affidavit. As a reminder, the certification form for independent study must also be signed with wet, digital, or scanned wet signatures by either the county superintendent, district superintendent, charter school administrator, or designee. Once the package is complete, the LEA will submit this to the COE, who will be responsible for signing the applicable section of the affidavit with wet, digital, or scanned wet signatures, and then sending the completed package to CDE. The completed Form J13A package should be submitted to CDE by email, where the LEA will receive an automated message from CDE confirming receipt. Please note, all Form J13A requests should be sent to CDE from the applicable COE. The ability to submit a request through email has not changed this part of the submittal process. If an LEA is unable to email the Form J13A package, it may be mailed to SFSD at the address listed on the Form J13A. If submitted by email, LEAs do not need to follow up by mailing in the package. The existing requirements for independent study documentation will remain in place for Form J13A submittals in the 25-26 fiscal year. LEAs must continue to submit a certified plan for which independent study will be offered to students that accompanies all Form J13A requests. Due to the growing number of public health emergencies and natural disasters that have impacted the state in recent years, there is an increased need for LEAs to provide continuity of academic instruction for students who are unable to attend in-person instruction during an emergency event. The independent study plan ensures that LEAs have a method to provide this instruction during an emergency event. CDE encourages LEAs to provide independent study as it is crucial in mitigating the negative impact of lost learning time and supporting mental health. Submission of the certification form for independent study is still required to certify that independent study plan submitted with the Form J13A includes the requirements listed on the certification form. It is important to note that approval of a Form J13A waiver is not conditioned upon implementation of the independent study plan. In this slide, please find our illustrated, printable emergency timeline for Form J13A requests in fiscal year 25-26 for your reference. Before moving on, we wanted to do some level setting by providing background information on the Comprehensive School Safety Plan, or CSSP, as the plan and its components will have a direct impact on Form J13A approvals beginning in fiscal year 26-27. Every TK through grade 12 public school is required to develop and maintain a CSSP designed to address campus risks, prepare for emergencies, and create a safe, secure learning environment for students and school personnel. School districts with fewer than 2,501 units of ADA may have one CSSP for all schools within the district. Each school is required to update and adopt its CSSP by March 1st annually. The school district, or COE, is responsible for approving CSSPs. Statute does not specify a date by which the CSSP must be approved by the school district or COE. However, they must annually notify CDE by October 15th of any school or schools that have not complied with this requirement. Information on CSSPs can be found at www.cde.ca.gov/ls/VP/CSSP.asp. One of the main legislative changes made in 24-25 was that LEAs must add what's called an Instructional Continuity Plan, or ICP, to their CSSPs. The ICP ensures student and family engagement and continuity of academic instruction during emergency-related events. To aid LEAs in their development of ICPs, CDE has posted guidance on our website. LEAs had to have a CSSP with an ICP by July 1st, 2025. There will be new certification requirements for LEAs submitting a Form J13A for events occurring after July 1st, 2026. This applies to all LEA types: school districts, COEs, and charter schools. LEAs will need to certify that they followed their approved ICP during emergency events. Specifically, LEAs need to confirm that they communicated with families and students within 5 calendar days of the emergency. This could include notifying them about the disruption, explaining instructional plans, or providing resources for support. They must also confirm that they provided in-person instruction, remote instruction, or enrollment in another LEA within 10 instructional days. If an LEA is unable to meet these timelines, they must detail the circumstances that prevented them from doing so. They also need to describe any engagement and instruction they were able to provide during that time. The goal is to ensure that students continue to receive access to education and support even during emergencies. These new requirements highlight the importance of having a well-prepared ICP and the ability to adapt quickly when unexpected events occur. Please note, these requirements are based on current law. If there is trailer bill cleanup, our office will amend guidance as necessary. While ICPs are not required for Form J13A submissions in fiscal year 25-26, the time to start preparing is now. Start by reviewing ICP best practice guidance on the CDE webpage. Ensure that an ICP was included in the CSSP by July 1st, 2025. The ICP must include protocols for establishing two-way communication with students and their families as soon as practicable, but no later than 5 calendar days following an emergency, and providing access to in-person or remote instruction as soon as practicable, but no more than 10 instructional days following the emergency. Prepare for verification of ICP compliance as part of the annual audit beginning in fiscal year 25-26. Begin submitting Form J13A requests with an ICP beginning July 1st, 2026. In the event an LEA submits an incomplete Form J13A, the Attendance Accounting Office has implemented a streamlined process to expedite its review. Here's how it works. If CDE's Attendance Accounting Office finds the Form J13A missing required items, such as an Independent Study Certification form, they will return it via email to both the LEA and the COE. The email will include the original submission and a helpful Form J13A additional items checklist. This checklist clearly identifies what is missing so that the LEA knows exactly what to fix or include. Once all the missing items are gathered and the form is complete, the LEA or the COE can easily resubmit the entire request to CDE. This process will reduce correspondence and expedite the time it takes for an LEA to receive an outcome letter. CDE published a quick reference guide for Form J13A submittals for school closures. This guide has helpful information for LEAs prior to, during, and after an emergency. LEAs can find this reference guide in the Resources section at the end of this presentation under Form J13A. This guide is applicable to all emergencies occurring up to June 30th, 2026.
In order to support LEAs throughout the school year, here is a list of resources. For questions related to attendance for apportionment, instructional time, and the Form J13A, please contact attendanceaccounting@cde.ca.gov. For questions related to the Form J13A submittal process, please contact J13A submittals@cde.ca.gov. These CDE websites contain resources on instructional time and attendance accounting, including an updated FAQs page on attendance recovery and an updated TK FAQs page to reflect the requirements under full implementation. Please use the following links and contact emails to obtain more information regarding the Form J13A and the resources available to those LEAs experiencing an emergency. CDE's new FAQs page on attendance recovery is located at www.cde.ca.gov/FG/IT/AA recovery.asp. On this page, you'll find questions organized under different tabs by topic, as well as the March 2025 presentation on attendance recovery in PDF format. Additional CDE guidance on operating high-quality AR programs was posted in June. Updates and additions to the AR FAQs were published in August. Contact details have been provided at the bottom of each section in order to direct you to the appropriate CDE offices for further information. These next few slides list the statutory references which have been mentioned today. This slide includes statutory references specific to school districts and COEs. This slide includes statutory references specific to charter schools. This slide includes statutory references specific to independent study. This slide includes statutory references specific to attendance recovery. Thank you for attending the Fall Attendance Accounting and Instructional Time webinar for fiscal year 25-26. We hope you have had a great return to school, and we wish you all a successful rest of the year. Goodbye.